Moms, what do you know about your child that you will never tell him or her? Story 1. I was a parental figure to my orphaned younger siblings, and there's something I never tell my sister. When she was going through a terrible period as a drug addict, late teens, she stole our mom's wallet, and all of our mom's credit card, bank accounts had to be canceled and changed. Our mom was in bad health, but had a huge life insurance policy she had gotten almost 15 years prior when she was healthier. When the accounts were canceled, she forgot to change the auto payments for the insurance. It was declined and subsequently canceled. She couldn't get another policy anymore. She had too many health problems. My mom told me about all this in confidence. Less than 2 years later, Mom died. Everyone thought she had a life insurance policy to help us, but she didn't. She left absolutely nothing. I'm the only one who knows why. It would kill my sister to know her addiction cost us several $100,000. The recovery from our mom's death was really hard. Siblings moved in with me, etc., and the insurance money could have saved us a long period of financial and emotional struggle. It will never be worth telling her. She's been through enough. We all have. I will never have more resentment and love for my little sis. Story 2. I know he injured at least 2 people and was injured himself at least once at a political rally that turned into a brawl. Some nights he would come home bleeding and with a black eye. He was a boxer, so I thought nothing of it, and I'm sure a few of those were boxing injuries, but I know he was hurt a few times in those political riots. Nearly a decade later, he moved out, and out of the country, coincidentally. My husband and I finally decided it was time to pack up his old room and turn his bedroom into something else. We found a few things that linked him to local fascist groups, just a few scraps he probably forgot to take with him. One of those things was an old newspaper clipping where I can clearly see him delivering a hard punch to the face of a political opponent. He's in a disguise, but I still recognize the clothes he was wearing. Then there was another picture from the same article where the guy he punched is laying on the ground and my son is getting ready to hit someone else. After we gathered everything incriminating, my husband and I decided to burn the evidence he left behind. Nothing could be gained by keeping those things. The articles were quite old, and my son moved to a new country that doesn't have his brand of fascism. My son followed a specific local type of fascism. Story 3. Years ago, we had an awesome cat named Chosen One. We all loved this cat, but especially my eldest son, who at the time was just beginning to drive. He was about 17 or so. One day my son was leaving the house to go somewhere, and when he left, he reached down and gave Chosen a little love, and out the door he went. Unbeknownst to him, the cat had followed him out the door, and for some reason, the cat must have run under the car. Nobody actually witnessed these events, so we're speculating on what exactly happened. So my son drives off, and a little while later, I go outside, only to find Chosen laying on the driveway, curled up in a ball, dead. We think the kitty ran under the car or was in front of the tire or something, and when my son drove away, he ran over Chosen and killed him. We were all pretty upset, and of course, when my son came home, we told him Chosen had been hit by a car in the road and died. We've never told him, and never will, that we're pretty sure he was the one that killed the cat. He'd blame himself and forever feel guilty about killing his favorite cat. Oh, that's heartbreaking. The only thing harder than losing a loved one is the fear that you could have prevented it if you'd only known something you had no way of knowing. Maybe it's not quite as bad as stealing from your mother and robbing your family of life insurance, but it's still a pretty awful weight to bear. That said, I really hope this OP's son isn't on Reddit. I can't imagine Chosen One being the most common name for a cat who perished in such a specific way. Imagine if reading this comment or watching this video was how he found out. It would be terrible news to learn either way, but especially when you know you're only learning it after countless strangers already know. But this cat story is probably nothing compared to the next one. Story 4. When my daughter was 3, she bonked my mom in the head with a toy, as 3-year-olds are prone to do. My mom had a blood clotting disease and got a blood clot in her head about a week later and eventually died from it. I'm not sure anyone but me has put 2 and 2 together, and I aim to keep it that way. My daughter had no idea what she was doing because she was 3. She would probably literally end her own life if she found this out, since she's a hair bipolar and gets to a really dark place with too much bad news. My mom never seemed to put 2 and 2 together. She had the disease for 13 years, and most people only live 6, so she felt very blessed. My wife would be devastated to know this, even though she knows I don't think she connected them. She probably doesn't remember my daughter bonking my mom on the head anymore, so I'll never tell them, and that's okay. Story 5. I saw my flip cam was missing from the table I put it on and went to look for it in my 11-year-old son's room. I checked to see if there was anything recorded, and there was. He was jacking it to a magazine of mine advertising women's clothing and underwear and commenting about which girl he would like to, quote, put his dong in. I put the camera back, and when he came home, I asked him to bring it downstairs if he had it. That gave him time to delete the videos, and he has no idea I am now hiding my flip cam and ladies' clothing magazines. He will never know why I saw his tiny wee-wee being manipulated to images of plus-sized women. You might want to tell him to never ever put things on the internet. Story 6. I was turning my daughter's mattress when I came across a notebook full of female nudes. She must have been putting it together for some time. Not wanting to embarrass her or violate her trust, I finished flipping the mattress and put the notebook back just as I'd found it. That was years ago, and she still has no idea. God, this thread is making me think all the embarrassing stuff my mom must have found. All these years. Those pictures I had below my mattress and below my books on my bookshelf, I never knew what happened to those once I left home. That really is the scariest thing about this thread. I can maybe rest assured that I never led directly to one of my parents kicking the bucket, but I'm sure nearly every kid had secrets they would rather their parents never found out about. We're just a few stories in, and it's already sounding like keeping secrets from a parent is next to impossible. So have fun letting that thought keep you up tonight. Story 7. That her first daycare auntie when she was aged 2 to 3 and going to her home every day had her life ended by her husband a year later. Story 8. She was conceived because I really wanted an iced cappuccino from Tim Hortons. He didn't feel like driving, so I made him a deal. It actually ended up pretty nicely in a field under a clear night sky with many, many stars out. Story 9. It's about my sister, but when she was a baby, my mother tried to give her away because she didn't want her. My dad found out and got her back from the woman. She's 21 and still doesn't know. This story ends way too quickly. My mind is flooded with questions. Obviously, I have questions about the mother. What happened to her next? Whether the father stayed with this woman who had tried giving their child away? All that good stuff. But I'm also super curious about this woman who just accepted the offer of a free baby. I mean, that can't be legal. Maybe she thought she was doing a good deed, but I don't even think you can give a car away without signing it over, so I have to imagine there are at least 1 or 2 restrictions in place for giving away a child. Story 10. That the only reason I taught my kids how to play poker was so that I could learn their tells and know when they're lying to me. Story 11. Dad here. I know what he's doing with the butter, and that's why I buy the store brand for him to, quote, make toast at night and leave my good butter alone. And there's a reason I bought her own rechargeable batteries, because it's nice to have any remote actually work when you try to use it. There's not a calculator in the world that goes through batteries like that. I didn't even think those things went through batteries that quickly. Is the shelf life better or worse than it is for an Xbox controller? Because I get pretty sick of changing those things out in the middle of a game. I can only imagine how frustrating it might be to have to stop for a battery change when you're just on the edge of climax. Maybe they ought to put a charge light on the side so you can see when you're running low. I don't know whether I'd be proud or ashamed if this is the idea that makes me a millionaire. Story 12. That my husband and I had a $100 bet on our son's orientation. I bet $100 he was gay. Story 13. If we had not lost the baby before him, he could not have been conceived. This applies to both children. Story 14. He has a third nipple. It's small, but it's a nipple. Honestly, I'm a little more concerned that this OP's son hasn't figured this out for himself. There's no way he's mistaken it for a mole. I recommend telling him. Then sit him down for a much longer talk about the values of situational awareness. Story 15. I have a favorite. I knew it. They do have favorites. Story 16. I will never tell my son that his biological dad tried to end his own life and himself when I was 6 weeks pregnant because he didn't want to be a dad. Story 17. Have a daughter in college. Her first summer back home, I went to wash all of her clothes she brought back. As a college girl, it was at least 4 loads. As I sorted her clothes before washing them, out tumbled 4 butt plugs wrapped in a bag. They were huge, like huge. So I carefully wrapped them back up and slipped them back into her other things. Look, I've never owned any plugs of my own, but I feel like if you're the type to have them, especially if you have them in your parents' house, you probably do your best to remember where they're kept. If she came home and found her laundry done, then she probably knows that you know. This is just going to be a weird secret that both of you feel like you're keeping from each other forever. You should just randomly start talking about plugs one day to see how she reacts. It sounds cruel, but I promise you'll have fun with it. Story 18. That when he was 3, he created a suit of body armor out of maxi pads, and I have photographic evidence. Authentic period armor. Story 19. From a son's point of view, my mom and the rest of my family have hidden from me that my older brother is only my half-brother, same mom. They've hidden it my entire life so far, and they think I don't know, but I heard my grandmother talking about it at a family reunion years ago. Same here. There's so much evidence that I can't not know, but they still won't tell me. Story 20. I caught my son once pretending to milk himself into a bucket while taking a bath. He was only around 4 years old, so I don't think he remembers, but he was hovering over a bucket and squeezing his willy. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me he was pretending his willy was an udder and he was trying to get milk. I said, "Okay, honey," and slowly closed the door. I did that to a dog when I was like 5. My mom laughed and told my grandma, who laughed harder. I really hope they forgot that. It must have been really weird for this OP's son when he got older and discovered that he actually could get milk from it. He's probably looking back at his 4-year-old self and wondering what he did wrong the first time. As for the commenter who did this to a dog, well, that's weird, but I'm sure the family pet must have absolutely loved you. My suggestion is to tell every girlfriend this story for the rest of your life. Chicks dig a guy who's good with animals. Story 21. I will never, ever tell my daughter that when she was 1 week old, I accidentally threw her across the room onto a wooden floor. It was about 2 a.m., I was breastfeeding her in the living room, and a huge spider crawled on my arm. The whole new baby / late at night thing made me stupid, so my reaction was to use the arm I was holding the baby in to get the spider off my other arm. My little girl went flying. It was horrible. She was fine though, completely unharmed, just kind of annoyed. You can't just offer your baby to a spider to make it go away. Story 22. Not a mom here. When I was around 5, my aunt walked into the room while I had the nozzle of a bicycle pump on the tip of my dong. I was trying to pump air inside me to see if I would swell up like a balloon. I didn't know this until my mother told me about it a few years ago when we were having a chat about funny things that happened in the past. Luckily, we do not live close to a bridge because I seriously thought about jumping. How could she think that this would be funny to me? I was mortified. Story 23. When I was 16, I found this stash of beer in our basement fridge. Miller High Life, I think. I drank some and thought it was utterly disgusting. Not like acquired taste bad, but rather, what the frick? How do people drink this? My stomach is literally on fire. Hid the bottles to throw away at a later date. Crossed beer off my list of things I liked. Forgot about said beer bottles. One day I remember and go to look for them where I hid them. Instead, a note. Quote, "Those beers were at least 8 years old. We removed them from Grandma's fridge when we were cleaning her house. I won't tell your dad. Hope your first beer was memorable. Mom." Props to this mom for dealing with the situation in a kind of funny way. She didn't overreact and assume her son was an alcoholic. She seemed to have understood that kids try things, especially as teenagers. But the note was a pretty good way of letting him know he hadn't gotten away with as much as he thought, while still saving them both the embarrassment of a direct confrontation. If he'd wanted to talk to her about it later, he probably could have. That's something pretty valuable to have in a parent. Story 24. That I wanted to give him to the fire station for a couple weeks. I didn't tell anyone until he was 2 weeks old, because I thought it was something wrong with him and me. I didn't think I loved him, and I was so ashamed. I ended up telling my husband in desperation one night, and he snatched my son away, telling him that he'd find the mommy who actually loved him. Neither of us knew it was severe postpartum depression. I thought I was incapable of that love, and my husband thought I was a monster. I'm still battling the PPD and anxiety a year later, but I even now can't believe how much I love him. I love him so much it hurts. I'll never tell my son about that horrible night, but I will tell him that depression and anxiety are never ever shameful. Story 25. I've answered this before, but my teenage daughter writes smutty fan fiction on Tumblr and has thousands of followers. She doesn't know that I know, and it's pretty darn good too. Story 26. That she ate cat poop. We had a very long-haired cat at the time. Apparently, some poop got stuck to his fur, only to fall out upstairs where the baby was crawling around and found it. 5 years later, she's still a normal, happy, and healthy child. Sorry, sweetheart. Your kid now has toxoplasmosis and will eventually become a cat slave. Good going, little buddy. Of all the things I've had to look up while writing commentary on this channel, this was the weirdest. But yes, that is indeed one of the ways you can get toxoplasmosis. You can also get it from eating undercooked meat, which I will hopefully assume is more common. But the kid wouldn't have survived if they'd gotten it, so there's no fear of becoming a cat slave. I think that's more a side effect of watching too many animal videos on TikTok. Story 27. Probably not the answer you're looking for. My son is 4, and he doesn't think I know about the vegetables he puts in his pockets when I'm not looking. Oh, I know all right. Laundry is fun. Story 28. My 3-year-old is a very affectionate little guy, but he's very embarrassed about his being affectionate. He thinks I don't know he comes into my room every morning for snuggles and then sneaks out when I wake up. Story 29. I know what their faces look like when they're trying to take a dump. In the same moment, I also realized my mother knows the same thing about me. It took me a while to realize this knowledge probably came from potty training. Until then, I was very worried about this family dynamic. Come to think of it, I guess I'm actually still not entirely positive that I shouldn't be worried. Someone keep an eye on this OP. Just, not when they're in the bathroom. Story 30. Stay-at-home dad here. I'm hoping that I never have the need to tell my kids that 2 out of the 3 serve jail time in utero. Dude, antepartum street cred. Story 31. I'll never tell my dear son that I follow every freaking single comment he makes on Reddit and that I'm the one who gives him the golds. Poor kid will always think that he's such a funny person. I'm 90% sure this commenter isn't even a parent and just wanted to plant the seeds of doubt in the minds of every Redditor who saw this comment. In which case, they have my respect. That's such an oddly wholesome way of trolling people. Make them think no one likes their jokes, but also make them feel loved at the same time. Brilliant play. Story 32. That I know he is depressed. I fear if I let him know that he'll go through with it or be too ashamed to speak with me again. Story 33. Not a mom, but my cousin doesn't know that he's a product of non-consensual intercourse. My entire extended family knows, as far as I know. Nearly all of his cousins know, aside from his own brother and sister. He was always treated special because of it, like enabling him will somehow make everything okay. He's turned out to be an entitled butthole because of it. Both of these last 2 stories are harrowing. Honestly, I can't help but wonder if honesty might be best in both instances. The first son needs to know he has someone that he can talk to, and the second might act less entitled if he understands what his mother's been through. But I could see both of these takes being somewhat controversial, and I'm not sure if there's any objectively right answer in either case. So let's open this up to the commenters. What do you think should be done in these stories? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Story 34. My son wasn't planned, and I never ever wanted or planned to have kids. I fell pregnant accidentally. He will never ever ever be told this because my mom repeatedly told me I was an accident as a child, and it really messed with me. I like to call my first son a wonderful surprise. He really was too. Story 35. I walked in on my 5-year-old stepson with his pants down, rubbing the cat against his dong, saying, "Oh, that feels good." I said, "That's not what the cat is for." He was embarrassed. The cat hasn't been the same since. I'm imagining a cat with a 1,000-yard stare. That cat has seen some crap. Story 36. My daughter is not biologically my husband's. She was conceived with donor sperm. Hubby is sterile. I want to tell her because I think it's fair just for medical reasons alone, especially now, considering she was born with a major heart defect. Hubby doesn't want to tell her. Might not ever. I don't think it would matter, but I would be devastated if it made her think less of my husband. She's only been with us a month, but he loves her so much it would crush him. The medical angle might actually be valid. The husband's position is sympathetic, but imagine this daughter having another condition one day where she needs a donor. If the truth somehow came out at that point, it would only add family drama to an already stressful time. Besides, it's not like she doesn't know who her real dad is. He's the one who's been raising her. There's no reason to feel insecure about that. Story 37. He was conceived after we got lost trying to find a Halloween party at a friend's new place. We ended up just going home, but as I was already in the French maid costume, it made perfect sense to get drunk and forget the birth control. I don't imagine we will ever tell him he was conceived inside a French maid costume. Actually, who am I kidding? We will totally bust this story out for his future spouse. Story 38. When my first wife was 4 months pregnant, she was diagnosed with stage 3/4 breast cancer. At 18 weeks, the doctor gave her a few choices. Her best chance of survival was to abort the baby and have aggressive chemo. We talked about it, and she decided to try and carry our son to term. They delivered our son healthy about 6 weeks early. She died about 5 months after he was born. I have since remarried, and he is now almost 18. I don't plan on telling him that she saved him at her expense. It was a tough time, and I don't blame him and never have. Story 39. That there's a chance he was conceived while me and his dad were both tripping on acid. Story 40. That I found a treasure hunt he had created as a surprise for his girlfriend on their anniversary. One of the clues was that she should go to the place where he, quote, first freaked her in the arse. I should add they were both adults when they first met, so whatever they do in their private lives is their business only. But I could never unsee that note. Not to mess with this OP's head, but it isn't even just the fact they did it that makes this story fascinating. They did it somewhere memorable enough to be part of a scavenger hunt. That means this likely wasn't just a bedroom. Not only did they get freaky, but they might have done so either outdoors or in a public space. Honestly, I just love the juxtaposition between something as romantic as a personalized scavenger hunt and to choose to use that of all things as one of the clues. Story 41. Went to use the bathroom, and I left our 8-month-old on the rug. I found her in the walk-in closet gnawing on my toy dong. Story 42. Sort of a meta thing, but my mom didn't tell me until right before she died that she knew I was destined to never hold a job or live an ordinary life. Her psychiatric background had long before determined I was schizotypal and prone to a pattern of atypical depression. She never told me until the end, because she knew how important it was to sort myself out rather than just be given a diagnosis. She told me that she was never disappointed in me and that even if I had problems, there'd still be a future for me. She was proud that I'd taken all the issues that I had so openly and never given up. Years later, I haven't improved much, but her encouragement and confidence in me still lingers. Whenever I'm in a truly bad place, she's still there in my head, giving me comfort. Love you, Mom. I'm glad we could end this on a good note. Sure, a baby gnawing on a giant motorized man pickle would have been a funny way to go out, but this story is a nice reminder that not everything we left unsaid is necessarily embarrassing or horrific. Sometimes, a parent is prouder of their children than the children themselves could ever know. They might not always take the time to say it directly, but if they're still there, supporting your choices and giving you comfort through both good times and bad, then you can assume it's probably true. Let yourself hear it through their actions, rather than waiting to see if they say it before the end. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.